Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com. This video is going to be another in my RHCE practice session series for the Red Hat Certified Engineer exam. Before we dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who hasn't subscribed yet to click that subscribe button and ring the bell when you do, so you can be notified of when new content comes available. If you enjoy the video, make sure you click like and feel free to share with others that might find it useful, and don't hesitate to leave a comment as well. As a reminder, these videos are opportunities for me to do some self-assessment of my ability to go through the objectives for RHCE. And the idea behind this is at the end of the video, if I feel pretty confident about what I've been able to either explain or demonstrate in some examples, then I think I'm probably well prepared for that particular topic for the exam. If at the end of the video I don't feel like that, then there's obviously some things that I need to go back and brush up on before I take my exam, which will be in about a month or so. That being said, these aren't necessarily intended to be authoritative information, nor are they intended to actually be tutorials for the exam objectives, but I do try to keep the information accurate, and perhaps with your own studies you might see how I struggle with a particular topic and such, and that might give you some ideas of how to do some of your own study for the exam. The objective for this video is the last of the RHCSA review objectives, which is under the be able to perform all tasks expected of a Red Hat certified system administrator, and that objective is the manage security objective. So if I were to go back to the RHCSA objectives and look at the manage security group, there are several objectives here, mostly working with your firewall, some access control lists, and SELinux. So without further ado, let's dive into them. The first objective we're going to look at is configure firewall settings using firewall-cmd and firewalld. So I'm here in my RHEL 8 workstation, or rather on my RHEL 8 workstation. Let's SSH into one of my lab servers. Password on the first try. That means it's going to be a good video. If any of you have watched my RHCSA practice session series, you know that's kind of a running thing of how many times am I going to fat finger my own password. So configuring firewall settings using firewall-cmd and firewalld. What firewalld is basically a service that runs on top of NF tables, which is the actual or actually I think NetFilter is the actual firewall if I'm getting my terminology right, but NF tables is the interface between us and what the kernel does for managing network traffic and such. And what firewalld is a layer of abstraction above that supposedly has a little more friendly syntax and such. Someday I will find the time to dig into NF tables and learn its syntax. Just in the fact, if I'm on a system that doesn't have firewalld and I can't get firewalld, I'll be able to at least function and configure firewall settings and such. But most of your Linux systems are going to come with firewalld installed. There's no way to know what you're going to have available for you on the exam. So one of the reasons why I use the minimal installations in my practice labs and such is to be able to have the fewest packages possible. So if I do need to have what I consider kind of a basic tool, then I know the name of the package to download. And again, any package that is available in the RHEL repositories, you're able to install in your environment for your Red Hat exams. So I'm fairly certain firewalld is already installed, but we can check to make sure. And I'm actually going to kind of cheat, and I'm going to check using systemctl. And there we go. If the firewalld service was, not available, then that will tell me that that I need to download and install firewalld, but clearly I don't. If you did, yum install firewalld or dnf install firewalld, that's all that you need to do for that. So the command to configure this firewall is going to be our firewall-cmd command, and firewall-cmd has some pretty good man pages. It also has some decent -- help options as well. Firewalld is one of these things that sometimes I find it difficult to try to memorize, the common options and such. You do the best you can with it, but you always have your documentation and such available for you on the exam. What I am going to do though is actually install Apache on this server real quick. So sudo dnf install httpd-y This shouldn't take too long to download. All right, so we've downloaded Apache, and let's go ahead and start the service. Use sudo for that. And the service should be running. Status HTTPD. Okay, awesome. So now on my workstation here, I'm going to open a browser, which hopefully this won't take too terribly long. I think this might have been the first time I've run the browser on this workstation, but we will see. I tend to not give my practice VMs a whole lot of RAM and such. So let's try to do HTTP lab rel and svr01. All right, not able to connect. Well, we can obviously connect to the server because we're connected via SSH, but the issue is the firewall by default is not allowing traffic on port 80. And a way you can see what is being allowed by default, I'm actually going to sudo into root. That's going to save me from having to type sudo a ton of times for this particular video. But we can do firewall-cmd. I believe it is list services. It's either that or it's list service. Yep, list services, and we can do list ports. All right, so the only services that firewalld is allowing in is cockpit, DHCP v6, and SSH. So one thing you can also do, I think list zone, nope, or is it get default zone maybe? Yeah, there we go. So the default zone for firewalld is public. Now there are several zones that you have available. I think actually we should be able to get that. Yeah, there we go. So these are the available zones that you have: block, DMZ, drop, home, public, trusted, and each of those have some different configurations and such with them. And you can also configure rules and such per zone to where, let's say that you move to a public network and you don't want to expose a lot of the stuff that you have on your laptop. You can move to the public zone, and that's only going to have these services available versus you might have other services that are configured for your home zone. But all of the configuration I'm going to do in this video is just going to go to your default zone. When you're doing configurations with firewall-cmd, you can specify the zone to use for that, which I think I just said that a moment ago. Sorry, I'm tired. Anyway, so what we want to do is allow HTTP traffic to be able to flow. So there's two ways of doing that. I can either allow it on port 80 or I can allow the service HTTP. Either is going to be a valid configuration. So we'll do firewall-cmd. We're going to do add service, and we'll do HTTP for that. And we're also going to do permanent. And what this does is add it to basically the what's it called when you on your switches you have startup config and running config. Yeah, basically adds it to like the startup startup config for firewall-cmd. So that way this is going to persist, and remember, everything with a Red Hat exam has to persist. And so if I were to reboot the machine, HTTP is going to be allowed. However, at this moment it is not allowed still. So to be able to make this work, we can reload the firewall, -- reload. It's going to reread the rules, of which we added a permanent rule for HTTP, and lo and behold, well, in theory, I'm doing HTTPS, of course that wouldn't work. HTTP, and there's the Apache test page for what we need. Now, another way that you could do this was simply add a rule without permanent, because that'll affect effectively the running config of the firewall. I tend to just do permanent and then reload the firewall, because I don't want to take the chance of just adding the rule, forgetting to do permanent, and then you're kind of screwed on the exam because it's not a persistent connection. It's not a persistent configuration, and so therefore you're not going to get or earn the points for your objective, if your objective is, configure the firewall. So a couple of other things that you can do with the firewall command. Let's go into the man pages real quick. Some of this I remember, some of that I would have to reference on the exam. But there is, what is it? It's called panic, I believe. Let's search for panic. There we go, panic on, panic off. So what panic does is basically set the firewall to where everything is dropped. And so, what if you're under some type of attack, you need to kill all the network connections? Panic mode is for you. One thing to note with this, it's a runtime only change, which means you cannot add a permanent rule for panic mode, which generally is good, but that was one thing I wanted to point out for firewall-cmd. There are other configurations you can do with that. There's one, I think it's what's it called? Rich rule, if I remember correctly. Let me reopen the man page here. Search for rich. Yeah, rich rule. So the rich rules, that you can really get some fine grained stuff going on there, whereas you are trying to think of a good example of a rich rule off the top of my head. Let me see if there's anything here in the man pages that give you an example of a rich rule. Here we go. Firewall-D rich language. Let's take a look at that real quick. There we go. Yeah. So whereas you can do things such as, add ports, remove ports and such, the rich rules allow you to have significantly more control over that. And so it would not be a bad idea, and I'll do this myself for the RHCE exam, to, as I get closer, maybe a week or so out, configure a couple little rich rules just to make sure that I have kind of the basic syntax under my fingers. I'm not going to do that in this video because I know for a fact I don't recall all of the particular syntax for the rich rules, but it is something that is available in firewall-cmd, and it would behoove you to know where to find it in the documentation should you need to use that on the exam and you have forgotten about it. So the next objective is create and use file access control lists. So let's quit out of this here, and let us see what the best way to handle this is. All right, we're going to create a couple of users. So user add, and who should we make for user this time? I've done some Naruto stuff. I think I did a Final Fantasy one before. Let's do another game that I greatly enjoy. We're going to make Iceman, user add Quickman. We're also going to make two groups. So we're going to do, user add Mega Man, user add Dr. Light. All right, and let's make two groups. We're going to call it villains, group add, not just group. Spell that right? Yeah. Villains. It's going to be villains. V-I-L-L. All right. Not going to stress over that. And heroes. So if I've misspelled villains, my apologies. I'm pretty sure it's like Villians. But anyway, end of the squirrel moment, back to the RHCE moment. And let's add these groups to a couple of these, or these users to a couple of the groups. So user mod AG, villains, Iceman. We'll do the same for Quickman. And we'll do heroes, Mega Man. And heroes, Dr. Light. All right, so we have some groups and some users here. Let's go into, actually we're going to make a test directory. Or should we do test directory or go into the temp directory? We'll use a test directory. All right, make dir test. And typically permissions, you're using the octal notation or the just user group other and then read, write, execute. What access control lists give you is a little bit more fine-grained access to that, for example. So let's go to root. We see test is owned by root, and what I want to do is, let's see, read, write, execute, read, execute. So let's say that I don't want to change the ownership of the test folder. I don't want to change it from root, but I want to allow the heroes the ability to write in this folder or in this directory. So what we can do is the set facl command. And let's see how well I remember this off the top of my head. So we're going to do set facl. We are going to modify. We're going to do the group, if I recall correctly. And the group name is going to be, am I doing this right? Set facl modify. So I remember we have, all right, so let's try this. So group heroes, the permission that we want, which is going to be read, write, execute, and then the directory. So that's going to be test. And if I get it right, it'll, yep, invalid option, invalid argument. I think I need to do -G. Nope. All right. So when in doubt, hit the man pages because it's going to tell you in a moment. All right. So, yep, -M is what we want. That's modify. X, I remember, is remove. So set facl -M. Remember the B and the K for that as well. What's my syntax? Yeah, G group, then the perms. Not quite sure what I was doing wrong there. If I'm looking at the ACL entries here, I have I see. Or do I see? All right, let's take a look at what I have here. So let's cat etc groups, or etc group, HEROES. Oh, did I misspell it? I must have. Yep, that's what I did wrong. Did a couple of things wrong. I misspelled my group name as well as did that dash when I didn't need it. There we go. All right, so now ls-l test, or ls-l at root. And so we see with test here, we have this read, write, execute, but we have a plus, and that plus tells us that there's an access control list that's affecting our directory here. So if we were to get facal or get file access control list test, it tells us what we have here. So the mask refers, if I recall correctly, to the maximum possible permissions for this particular entity, in this case the directory. We see that group and owner still have just are still root and root. The user has read, write, execute. Group has read, execute, but the heroes group has read, write, execute. So let's put this to the test here. If I were to su into quickman, all right, I should be able to go into the test directory, and we're going to echo foo to test file. Permission denied. Oh, I did the heroes. Okay, yeah, this makes sense. I got a bit confused. I probably shouldn't wait so late to do some of my videos. My brain's a bit tired. But case in point, so impromptu study tip for the exam: don't do the exam when you're tired, because you'll make little brain mistakes like I just did. So that is what we expected. Let's exit out of being Quickman, and let's change to Megaman. And we'll cd to test. That makes sense. Let's try echoing foo to test file. All right, that looks good. Let's look at the permissions for it. It's owned by Megaman. Yep. Now, what we did was just do a single permission on this. You can set default permissions for directories, and what that's going to do is, if I recall correctly, is allow inheritance of access control lists to the files that are made in there. So let's put that to the test. Let's exit here, and let's do this. We're going to set facl. I think -B removes everything, and then we'll do test. All right, ls-l. And test no longer has any access control list. You see that the plus is gone from that. So now we're going to set facl d for default, modify group heroes, doing read, write, execute, and test. All right, so let's see what happens with switching user over to Mega Man. We'll go into test. And so LSL, so that's our first test file. Let's echo foo2 to test file 2. And let's see what happens. Permission denied. I'm surprised for that. Or surprised about that. Why would that be permission denied? Because well, all right. So here's some troubleshooting for you. Let's see if we can figure it out. So let me exit out of being Mega Man, and let's go back to root, get facl test. All right, default group. You know, I think I need to make an entry just for group as well. And let's see what happens here. So let's just go in as root test echo foo2 test file 2, because root can do whatever it wants, right? Okay, and so now we see that, yep, all right, that I think makes sense. Get facl test file 2. There we go, yep. So my idea about the inheritance thing is true, but I think I need to make a separate access control list just to be able to write to the test file 2. I think that's how that's supposed to work. If I'm wrong, feel free to put that in the comments, and I encourage that on any of these practice session videos. I try to make the information as accurate as possible, but this is kind of what I'm doing off the top of my head to see if I remember stuff properly for the exam. And I encourage you to correct me when I'm wrong. It helps both me and anyone that might be watching these videos. You know, we want them to get the correct information as well. So let's SU into Mega Man. And what I want to try to do is, since I have read, write, execute on test file 2, I'm going to see if I can actually edit that file. So test file 2. And let's just add some text. All right, cat test file 2. Okay, yep, that is what happened there. So let's go back to root. And let us set facl. We're going to modify. We're going to explicitly add the group. Now you can do this for individual users as well. I just happen to be doing group, just because. But you could do this for individual users. So group heroes. Read, write, execute, test. All right. So let's SU back into Mega Man. Go into test, echo foo3 to test file 3, and that should work, which makes sense. And test file 3 should have the default access control list as well. One thing that can be useful with access control lists is kind of related to the objective where you have to set GID. Access control lists can give you some more flexibility in what to do for your permissions if there's something where you really don't want to change the user and group owner of it, but you want to give people access. However, the other side of the coin is that can make permissions troubleshooting a bit more challenging because you have another layer worth of permissions to work with in addition to the good old read, write, execute permissions. Now let's take a look. Let me exit out of here. Let's take a look at the man page one more time because I'm trying to remember. -B either removes just I think -B removes all access control list entries, and then -K does just the default. But let's take a look just to make 100% sure here. Set facl. Yeah, B is remove all, K is remove default. And you can use -R for recursive as well, just like when you're doing change mode and change owner. Now let's see, let me look through here, see if there's anything else that's a significant thing. You can you can pipe stuff and set the access control list over the pipe for files. I don't remember how to do that off the top of my head. That might be something that I need to look up just to have under my fingers, so to speak. Let's see if it mentions it here. Ah, yeah, here it is. So it gives you the syntax of copying the access control list from one file or another, and you do that with the pipe. And it gives you some examples in your man pages should you need to do that on your exam. Next is key-based authentication for SSH. I'm actually not going to go over this because I hit it in the very first video for RHCE, and just for the sake of time, I'm not going to come back to it. I will have a little pop-up that'll happen here. That will be a link to that video, and you can check it out. And I will also mention it in the description of the video as well, so you can go right to it where I talk about the key-based authentication. All right, moving on from there, we get into our good friend SELinux, which sometimes strikes fear in the hearts of administrators, and it really shouldn't. Trying to think of the best way to describe it. SELinux is basically another layer of security, and the idea behind it is, rather than like I think it's called discretionary access control, which that's our octal notation permissions and such. The mandatory access control is the model that SELinux follows. And again, if I'm wrong, feel free to put that in the comments, that unless you tell SELinux, yes, this thing can do this action to this item, which is effectively what everything in SELinux is, then the thing can't do the action to the item. So taking a look at SELinux, we'll use the files that we have here. You can use lslz, capital Z, to see SELinux. And if I remember correctly, we have the, all right, so in SELinux context, which is what we have here, there should be a user level. I can't recall off the top of my head what the middle field is. And then the context, and this is a type context for whatever file. You can also do, you can set SELinux type context for ports and such as well. So first of all, the first thing that's on this here is setting and enforcing set enforcing and permissive modes for SELinux. So there's a tool called get enforce, which will show you the mode of SELinux. Right now we are enforcing, which means SELinux is going to prevent things from doing what they don't have permission to do and log about it. You can set SELinux to permissive, which what that's going to do is allow the action but still log it. Permissive is a great troubleshooting tool. Now, you will probably find stuff on the internet of like, hey, to make this work, just turn off SELinux, set it to disabled. Don't do that. That is generally a bad idea. You may have application vendors that says our application works only if you turn off SELinux, of which my response to that would be you need to make your application enterprise worthy, so that way it will function with the appropriate SELinux configuration. So just in the interest of being complete, if we were to go into Etsy, and where is that in Etsy? This is something that I don't turn off ever, and so I forget where it is. Yeah, there we go. Is it semanage.com for just config? Let's less config. There we go. So in SELinux config, you can set this to disabled, which just absolutely does not load any particular SELinux policy. Again, you don't want to do that. If for troubleshooting, set it to permissive, and then use some tools to figure out what SELinux is complaining about, and then make that configuration change or find another application. Might be the kind of draconian way of saying, don't use the app for that, but oh well. All right, so to set that permissive mode, we just do set enforce permissive. You can also do set enforce, I think 0 as well. Get enforce, show that we're in permissive, and then set enforce 1, and that should put us back into enforcing mode. All right, the next little topic is list and identify SELinux file and process context. So we saw the file context with lslz, All right. And another thing, the process context. So this is going to get into using PS, and I believe the what you want is Z, capital Z for that as well. So let's try PSAUX Z. Yeah, that looks like that. So that's giving us SELinux context as well. You can see system U kernel type, right? So again, you have user privileges with that, and some of these users aren't like users as you would think of in past WD. It's entities just for SELinux. I'm drawing a total blank on the middle field for that, and then you have the type for your third field, which is for the SELinux stuff I've had to touch, which of course, I'm sure there's people out there that eat, breathe, drink SELinux that have to touch all three, but for everything that I've had to do either in my lab or things I've prepared for the RHCSA level of test, and I think RHCE is probably going to follow the same idea. You're primarily going to be working with that third field. One other thing, and this I guess would fall into the list and identify file and process context, there is an application called SEManage, and SEManage is really the primary tool that we're going to use for configuring stuff with SELinux and to get some information about it. SEManage is not installed by default on the minimal installation. And again, in your actual testing environment, you may or may not already have it, but if you don't have it, the package that you need to install is yum policy core utils -python -utils -y. Now, if you can't recall that, and I've had to install, I misspelled it. Policy core utils. And also I did the incorrect command as well, yum install. If you can't recall the name of that package, and I recall it just because I've had to type this so many times doing stuff in my lab, you can do yum or DNF what provides SEManage, and that will give you the name of the package that you need to install for that. So now that we have SEManage, if you're ever curious about all of the different contexts that you have available to you, we'll do SEManage fcontext for file context -L. And that is everything that has been configured. Now this actually is a great resource, and I'll show you why a little bit later in the video when I do an example, but that shows you some syntax. This basically is saying anything that's in var, spool, text, mf, and anything after that. This particular syntax can be sometimes difficult to remember. I'm actually going to widen my window just a bit here. And that the SEManage fcontext -L helps tremendously with that. And also it gives you the name of some of the context types. For example, let's say, and we are going to do this, but we need to do something with HTTPD. So we'll grep this to, let's see, var www html. And this is showing you some of the SELinux context that you would use for Apache. So great resource to use. Now you can also see, we did fcontext, I'm pretty sure. You can do some things other than fcontext. Yeah, file context, what fcontext stands for. Yeah, so ports, and you can look at booleans as well. So SEManage port L, and this gives you different port information. And where this will come into play is, let's say that you have an objective that says, all right, so we want to do SSH on something other than port 22. Well, let's grep for SSH. All right, so there's an SELinux context that basically says we're going to allow SSH to happen on TCP 22. So even if you were to configure SSHD and configure the port to be something other than 22, and you open up whatever port this is on your firewall, SELinux is still not going to allow SSH connections to something that's not port 22. So what you would have to do is modify that to allow it to happen. And if we don't go too long, I might try that in a quick example, but I know we're already starting to get a bit long for that. You also have booleans, and these are, as you imagine, on off. This is in addition to file context and stuff. There are several for HTTPD. One is home dirs. When I was doing my RHCSA training, there were a lot of examples of using the home dirs for this. And that is one of these. You can set up Apache to be able to serve files and such out of a user's home directory. And I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how to do that. But in order for that to work, you would have to have some file contacts configured, and you would have to enable the SELinux boolean for home dirs. And this off, that refers to the current state of it and then default. So it's kind of like firewalld as far as you can have kind of like the running configuration of SELinux booleans and then the default or the persistent configuration for that. All right, so let's see. There's a separate one for use boolean, so we'll take a look at that in a moment. The next topic is talking about restore default file context. So what this means is, let's say that you make a change to SELinux context for a particular file. And in this case, let's do, we're going to make a file called HTML under the opt directory, or ls-lz. We see the SELinux context for this directory of HTML. Let's say that we wanted to, configure Apache to use this directory rather than like var www HTML, right? So we do that, we do the permissions and do the configuration on Apache, and it's not going to work because of SELinux. So if we were to set this, let's see how well I remember. So we are going to do SEManage fcontext add, and type is going to be, if I remember right, as HTTP. Is HTTP sys read write content T. Rather than guess, let's check. So SEManage fcontext -l grep for var www HTML. I think I was pretty close. Oh, HTTPD. Yeah, there we go. All right, so I'm going to copy that and let's try this again. So SEManage fcontext, because we're changing the file context, A for add, T for the type, which is going to be this, and then we want to do opt HTML and then everything that would be after HTML. And this, I've done this syntax enough times that I've memorized it, but as you can see from the output from grep, that would be most helpful for you. Oh, wait. Oh, I gotcha. I forgot about this. This needs to be in quotation marks. Otherwise, when you do that syntax for like everything after this directory, it'll complain as it just did. Now, in my experience, it takes a moment or so when you make a change to SELinux, either file contexts or booleans or ports and such. So don't be surprised if this takes a moment. Don't think, hey, you've broken your system. Just be patient a bit and then it will finish. All right, so if we do ls-lz, we see that the SELinux context has not changed. So what we have to do is basically tell SELinux you need to reread what contexts are configured, because basically what we're doing is adding to the SELinux policy, right? We need to reread your policy and apply the contexts as they're supposed to be. And the command we use for that is restorecon. And I like doing -v for this, just because it'll tell you what's going on. -R is for recurse. So let's say that I had, made this directory and then made a bunch of files and such. If I wanted to just reset the SELinux context in one fell swoop, this is how I would do it. So opt HTML, and it says it relabeled from that to the appropriate context, and we can verify that with ls-lz. So the thing to think about for the exam, if you have to do something with SELinux and it's a, set this context to a particular setting, you want to do that restorecon to check. Now there's one other command for doing that, and I think it's called chcon. Don't use it simply because it doesn't persist, and in my experience the experience I've had with SELinux, when you make changes, you're going to be adding it to the actual policy. And again, for your exams, everything is going to have to persist. So you may as well just do SE manage for that. But if you're curious, you can check out the man pages for ChangeCon. All right, next is use boolean settings to modify system SELinux settings. So again, I'm not going to go through the process of setting up the little home dirs in HTTPD. I can't remember it off the top of my head, and that'll make the video be ridiculously long. But actually, you can do get SE bool as well as using SE manage for that. And I'm going to grep for HTTPD. Oh, get SE bool A for all of them. And let's say that the one that we needed to change was HTTPD enable home dirs. So this is fairly easy. Set SE bool. Should be able to give it the name. I don't think I copied it. See if I'm remembering correctly. The name and then true false 1 0. That should be everything that it accepts. So we're going to set to 1. Of course. Yay, there we go, and we're done. But are we? Let's do that SE manage boolean -l, and we're going to grep for HTTPD enable home dirs. Home dirs. Yep, it's not going to find that. Home dirs. Notice how we have that on off, and if you recall from looking at the SE manage, the first column is current running state, and then the second column is default. So even though we have changed this boolean, when we reboot the system, it's not going to be there. So what we'll have to do is set SE bool -p for permanent home dirs 1. Oh, capital P. All right, and let's check SE manage again, and they should be both on and on. Now, one thing I'm curious about, let's do this. So let's do permanent off. I'm curious to see if that affects the running state as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, it looks like it does. So now let's do permanent on, and let's see if that affects the, yeah. All right, so permanent is going to affect running state as well as default. So quite frankly, you probably just want to use -permanent all the time on your exam. I'm not sure in real life if you'd want to do that. Perhaps troubleshooting you wouldn't, but again, it's kind of like ChangeCon. I think you will be using -p for SE bools, just like you would use SE or SE manage fcontext for your files and ports versus ChangeCon for that. All right, and the last objective from the old RHCSA exam under the Managed Security is diagnose and address routine SELinux policy violations. So using the SELinux permissive is a great tool for that, as far as that helps you determine is SELinux causing the problem with whatever it is that you need. But it's not, it doesn't tell you specifically what's being violated with that. So that stuff is stored, let's see, var directory log, and I believe it is in the audit.log. So let's tail this audit.log. All right, that's a ton of stuff. And you know, you can see some stuff here. Looks like some complaints and such. So there is an easier way to work with this, and that is with the SEAlert command. SEAlert comes from I believe the name of the package is SE troubleshooting, or SE troubleshoot-server is the package that it comes from. So let's see if I'm correct with that. So we'll do yum what provides SEAlert. I'm pretty sure it's going to be SE troubleshoot-server is the package that we need for that. Yep, SE troubleshoot-server. So I know for a fact that's not installed on this system. So yum install SE troubleshoot-server, and we'll say yes. All right, so let's make another directory. Actually, we'll use our test directory for this. So let's go into test, and we'll do we'll just use the test files. That'll work fine for this. Actually, I want to rename test file to testfile.txt. Okay, so what I'm going to do real quick is, let's see what the permissions are for this. ls-l, so test, read, write. Oh yeah, we have the access control list for that. All right, so they'll be able to get into that, and then, okay, so they can read that stuff. Awesome. All right, so what we're going to do, since we installed Apache, let's go into etchctpd conf. Thought we installed Apache, did we not? Fairly sure we did. Maybe I'm just getting my directories wrong. httpd.conf. All right, so we're going to go in here. We're going to make a couple of changes real quick. And we are going to change the document root to just test. And we will change this also to just test. We don't necessarily need to change this, but just for good measure, why not? All right, so this should serve up that web page. So if I were to do test file, oh wait, I need to reload Apache. Okay, test file.txt. All right, so forbidden, we don't have permission to get to this resource. Now, one of the reasons for that is probably going to be SELinux. So as a troubleshooting measure, we'll do set enforce 0 for permissive. Let's see if it works this time. Yep, there's our foo, kind of really like mice type on your video. And if I were to go back and set enforce back to 1 or to enforcing, forbidden. So clearly SELinux is the problem. The question is, how do we know what thing to fix? So let's go back to that var log audit directory. Have our audit.log, and what we're going to use is SEAlert. Now, I need to look at the man page real quick. So I can't remember the, I thought it was -I for analyze. No, -A for analyze. That's it. All right. So what we're going to do is SEAlert -A, and we're going to feed it audit.log. SEAlert -A audit.log. Now this will take a couple of moments or so. So again, if you do this on your exam and it feels like it's sitting at 99% forever, it's okay. Take a breath, get a sip of water, and you'll have information soon. All right, so it found some stuff here, and let's see what we have. All right, test file. All right, now notice this plugin catch-all 7.6% confidence. What this SEAlert does is it tries to gives you it gives you some suggestions on potentially how to fix stuff. And so there's one thing to do here, and it's only 7.64% confident about that. All right, so here it's 50% more confident about that one there. But what we want, 83% confidence. And basically what it says is SELinux is preventing HTTPD from reading this file. You need to change, if you want to allow HTTPD to access this file, you need to change the label. And I believe it's, okay. So does it just give you all the labels to try? Or file type is one of the following. Yep, so it basically says we need to change the label on that. It's not telling us the explicit file type for that. It is giving you the command, which is kind of nice. But you could do that semanage fcontext-l and search for HTTPD. And, you can read those and kind of figure out, oh, we need something that's at the very least has something that looks like it reads, and that RW typically is going to be a read write. And so if we were to do that, which we did before, I'm not going to do it again just because we're getting a little bit long on the video, that will solve the problem. And I just said I'm not going to do this, but the system administrator in me does not like leaving stuff broken. So let's do it real quick. And it'll be a chance for me to practice. So what I'm going to do is actually do that for the whole directory. So semanage fcontext-a-t httpd, what was it, sys read write content _t test, That'll take a moment. All right, restore con rv for test. All right, and it relabeled some stuff, and let's try it. There's our foo. So that in fact was the proper answer, was fixing SELinux. So I know this video and the previous few have been pretty long, and I would imagine the videos that are going to be about the core components of Ansible aren't going to be quite as long, or if they're long, they'll be a bit more in depth, because there was just a lot of stuff to review for the RHCE exam that basically, if it's on RHCSA, it's probably going to be fair game for RHCE, or at least from what I have gathered. So I want to thank you for taking the time to stick with me. Hopefully you have found it useful. If you did, make sure that you click like and share it with others that might find it useful as well. You can also leave comments, ask questions, leave critique, leave praise. I accept it all, and I respond as I have both time and ability. I do want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video. And as always, if you are watching and have not subscribed yet, make sure you click that subscribe button and ring the bell when you do, so you can be notified of when new content comes available. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you the next time.